Can I have a call to order here, please? And a roll call. May Lily?
Chairman Myjack,
Yes, ma'am. Here.
Vice Chairwoman Thompson, Member Burdette,
Here.
Member Tucker. Here. Member Miller,
Here.
Member Delgado,
Here.
Member Nico,
Here.
Alternate Member Young,
Here.
Alternate Member Rosa. Thank you.
All right. Looks like we have a quorum. So if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. I guess next up is approval of the minutes. I hear a motion.
I moved. Oh,
I was waiting for somebody else to do it.
Oh, your microphone's not on.
I moved to approve the minutes of our previous meeting.
I second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Are there any discussion? Any comments on the minutes? Any additions or edits? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All righty, on to petitions and requests from the public present. I believe we need 5 minutes on the clock, Lily. Please and thank you.
Stan Johnston at the last meeting. What happened to Laura Lee?
She's out of town. She's
Okay.
at a restaurateurs convention, I believe, in Washington, D.C.
This was something that you ordered from the city. I don't know if they've got it to you yet. Pardon?
Yes, we have.
Okay, all right. So there's a page in here. It says that a lot of pages are 11 are bigger if you get the report. So I haven't requested for a report. In other words, these ones that are 11 by 17, they're probably at least 24 by 36 if we still have them. I doubt that we have them. The one plate that I've highlighted is this plate that has, it's 11 by 17. I just did half of it, and someone only got one of them. So this particular plate, 11 by 17, is especially interesting because it shows 16 sections that the city is to use for details of cross sections of the ditches and canals. And they range from a width of 70 feet to 170 feet. We have no ditches in Titusville that are that way. Not one of them. Not one of them. So the epiphany that you can conclude from this is that since this was done in 1966 and we have no ditches or canals like this, is that we've been lied to for 60 years. The people that we have trusted have not done their job. This is a big deal. And it has to do with my profession, engineering profession, and other people. So I'm not sure how we can blame anyone. It's been passed on. It's something like a generational curse or whatever you might want to call it. But the city has lied to us regarding sustainability, regarding flood control. And the flood that we had back in October and November of last year, it should have been much reduced had we followed our instructions and our rules that we had already have. But the city has lied to us. So I don't know what can happen, what you can do, but you have this book. As you say, you have it now, or are we going to have it? Get it?
It was emailed to us.
It was emailed to you. I think you should get a hard copy because you can't, there's only so much you can do with an email. This is many pages. So I was hoping that you would have, I expected you would have this instead of something that's email. You emailed, you copied yours?
I got it sent to me because whenever I get something, whether it's the minutes of our meeting or something, whenever they send me something, I print, like if it's this big, I print the cover and the table of contents so I know what's in the book.
Excellent.
Then I look at it electronically, so by
Okay.
hand I can find it. Electronically, I can see it, so I printed this, so I have an electronic copy.
There's a page, there are pages in there, it says, what is to be done? And it lists these sections, and it lists the cubic feet per second that is to happen in the cross sections for, so that it won't erode, and for also for some, for our culverts and so forth, so that they will have sufficient velocity for cleaning, being self-cleaning. We don't have any of that. The city is in other words, the sustainability that we have in our budgeting has been dishonest. So I'm giving something to you. Any questions you might have? I've got just a few seconds left, so if anybody has any questions of me, I'm here, and then I'll leave.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I've started to read through that. I'm not completed, I haven't completed it, but there is some legitimate infrastructure that's been put in place. Why are you saying that there is not?
What legitimate infrastructure has been put in place?
Well, according to the plan, you're saying that plan is completely bogus?
Pardon? I'm saying that this is bogus? No, I'm
asking you.
saying that this is real, and what you have is bogus.
So you're saying there are no canals or ditches in Titusville?
I said that there's 16 sections there. The narrowest one is 70 feet wide. The biggest one that goes to St. John's is 170 feet wide. We have no ditches that I know of that have any of those typical sections, not one.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Lily, can you remind us when the new stormwater master plan is going to be? What's the schedule on with that? I know that's in the works, but
Yeah, and I'm not 100% correct, but I believe it's in like the budgeting process at this point.
okay. So it's in work. We're going to come to a solution here, Stan. It may take a while, but we'll get to it. Anybody else, petitions or requests? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to old business. Wetlands, our favorite subject. Somebody told me it's all about land management.
Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Burdette.
if I may, I just had a comment to make because I have to actually leave before 6.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make a comment about one of the city council agenda items from yesterday. Had to do with drilling down into the brackish layer of the aquifer. I'm sure we'll be probably discussing it quite a bit more soon. But while I agree that we obviously do need to plan ahead for future potable water sources, obviously I don't really agree that we should be drilling into the brackish layer of the aquifer and pulling water directly from the lagoon. Instead, I really believe that we probably should be pursuing something more along the lines of stormwater reclamation. Not only does this alleviate many of the issues we already have with stormwater, but it helps protect and restore the lagoon at the same time. And in the long term, it's often cheaper than desalinization and lagoon intakes. I believe council had said that this would be discussed a little bit more. Was that going to be discussed more tonight, or would it be pushed more to the next meeting?
It's not currently on tonight's agenda. I'll add one comment to that, and that is that we are the Water Resources Board for the city. And it strikes me as a smack in the face that it wasn't even addressed to us before it was presented to council. I would have thought that this board would have had a say on something so environmentally critical as our water, raw water resource. But that's my perspective. See, you may not know, Member Burdette, but I, along with Jim Egan, who was then the Marine Resource Council Director, we're on a citizen science board with the St. Johns River Water Management District to study putting in a desal plant in the Indian River Lagoon. We wanted to put in a 30 million gallon a day plant co-located with the FPL power supply because short runs made for cheaper power for such a heavy load. And so we started looking at that, and the thought at the time was, well, we'll just put the effluent right back into the lagoon. We're just taking the fresh water out. But what we're putting back is not something that's naturally found existing on the surface of the earth. It's highly reactive. And we figured out in a fairly short amount of time in modeling that we couldn't even put a 5 million gallon a day plant there because the Banana River would have been dead in 2 years and the rest of the lagoon in 5. So it's what you do with the effluent. That's the real question. Whether you suck it out of the ground or whether you suck it out of the lagoon, you have to deal with the effluent. And the only solution that the management district came up with was to send it out 17 miles into the Gulf Stream where it could be mixed. Because if you start dumping it offshore, you're going to kill your offshore wildlife too. So there's a real diminishing set of returns when you start looking at desalinization. You have to find a way to deal with the effluent. And if you can do that, maybe turn it into salt and sell it to the people up in Maine. I don't know. But that's what I know about desal. It's going to be a hard pull to actually make it work. The better alternative, I think, is taking our stormwater and pumping it into the ground and recharging the artificially recharge the surficial aquifer and push that salt layer further down, which gets rid of the brackish water entirely. And it restores our aquifer to where it should be. Right now, we're not doing either. We're continuing to cover up and we're continuing to run it into the lagoon and not putting it into the river or the ground. Those are all problems that we have to fix.
All right.
Oh boy, I got other lights. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to comment on, I watched the city council, and it was Member Stokel that said the stormwater people had given them, apparently they had asked for options of potable water source for increased development, and she's the one that said we should run this by the TEC before we make a decision. So I think that's what you're talking about.
Good. That'd be great. Okay, back to the board. On to wetlands. Mary, please.
Quick question, can we put that on the agenda for next meeting?
Yeah, so the plan currently is to have what that was presented to on your next agenda. Yeah.
I don't know if we're talking about water. Can I say something about water?
If you want to just say something, yeah.
Okay. I think I've said this before. When I was a kid, we moved here in 1957. My dad put down a well, and we went down 5 feet and got water. When he turned 60, we put another piece of pipe down. We put a piece of pipe in 57, 20 foot, another in when he was 40, another when he was 57. So we had a 60-foot pipe going down to get water for the well for watering the grass. So in 2005, it was a 60-foot piece of pipe and water was 55 feet down. So in the years I've lived here, the water has gone from 5 feet down to 55 feet down to get water. I just thought, since we're talking about water, I might mention those who haven't been here that long, what's happened.
Thank you, Bill. I'm just waiting on Mary to get set up.
Yeah, that's what.
All righty then, what are we looking at here? It's like another Kimberly Horn subdivision. I think this is going to be Mary's example. Should we have done this earlier?
All right. We hope to accomplish some resolution on flu policy 1.16.4. And if you'll remember, you suggested that the last sentence in there, which read the allowable impact should be based on site-specific evaluation determined through the permitting process conducted by all the regulatory agencies with jurisdiction, that should go. And there was a substitute sentence. No wetland shall be impacted by development activities without appropriate land use review and approval by the city. The city shall apply the land use planning policies of this objective in a manner consistent with objective 1.6 of the conservation element, which pertains to wetlands. Permit approval by a regulatory agency shall not substitute for independent land use review and approval by the city. And the city's land use review and approval should not be influenced by any action taken in response to a regulatory agency's permitting decision. In other words, you can't just get a permit and then say, I can do what I want to do. I do have one quick question for the attorney. On this page here, flu policy 1.16.4. Okay, this has to do with the way you write legal language, and obviously having no training in legal matters other than as a volunteer. It says in that, I'd like to know what he thinks. Now we have our attorney, David, and if he can look after the strike through, the second sentence after the strike through says the city shall apply the land use planning policies of this objective in a manner consistent with objective 1.6. The question is on the of this objective, do we need to, is of this objective sufficient, to identify all the policies, 1.16.1, 2, 3, and 4?
Yes, it would be everything within 1.16.
That's just what we want to know. Thank you so much. It's good to have an attorney here. Okay, now, here's what you have to decide. What are you going to do with that first sentence? So that's why we have, oh, by the way, there's something on the back of this paper, flu policy 1.16.4, and we'll look at that when we look at, again, at policy 1.16.3. So, you got this paper here. Let me scoot up this tab. And it says that there was a relatively minor change from, the pre-2010. 2010 was when the big changes occurred, and they did not match the conservation element in several ways. They had conditional uses, within the conservation land use for if there's no practical alternative to ensure reasonable use of the applicant's policy. Now, pre-2010, there was no provision for residential uses of 1 unit per 5 acres. That was put in 2010. Now, in 2010, it did say impacts to area designated as conservation land use shall be considered if it is unavoidable due to the absence of feasible and or practical alternatives for reasonable use of their land. So you got just a minor change, but what have we done to policy 1.16.3? What did we do last time? (1.16.3) was the one that says
1 unit per 5 acres?
yeah, there's 1 unit for 5 acres. And we extended that, if you'll remember, right?
Right,
What did we extend it to?
to 1.8% of impact,
The 1.8% for what?
wetland impacts,
For what kind of land?
conservation land.
Conservation land use and what kind of development? Was it all kinds of development? No, it wasn't. What was it?
Didn't include PD, if I recall.
No, it has nothing to do with PD, nothing to do.
Well, it's single use.
Yeah,
Single-family
single-family
use.
residences.
Okay, so what you did last time, as a matter of fact, I got it right here. It said allowable uses within the conservation land use area shall be limited to residential unit uses of 1 unit per 5 acres, so-and-so, so-and-so. The preceding limitation of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres within the conservation land use may be applied as a maximum percentage, limiting wetland impacts to not more than 1.8% for residential development. You'll remember it has nothing to do with commercial or industrial, right?
So far.
But we omitted that in the language.
Pardon me?
Didn't we omit that in the language? The industrial and commercial?
It was never there. Never, I know. Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, you had commercial and industrial uses are not permissible in the conservation land use category. That you added to, right, John? Good point. we stated the fact that there's no provision for impacting these large wetlands, and wetlands that are to be preserved. There's no provision for doing that to impact these for commercial industrial development. Okay? Now, so what we've done, we have given a reasonable use with the 1.8% for all residential development. And the county has that too. It's exactly the kind of thing they have. I mean, they have a little difference because they don't have the conservation land use overlay. Now, you should have got an email from me. Did you get it?
Yes.
It was some email correspondence with Darcy McGee. Anyway, so we'll get to that later because we want to talk a little more about what Darcy said and maybe tweak this language. I really, really appreciate that question, by the way, on the cumulative impacts. And also your discussion. I mean, it is super important for you to raise your questions because, you know, I mean, we're volunteers and we're working together. And, you know, everybody's input helps us to get a better product. Not everybody's not going to think of everything. So, and now we have a chance to figure out what to do with that first sentence in 1.16.4. So if you can go back to this paper here. 2 changes to policy 1.16.4 in 2010. Okay, so they had conditional uses before that, and now they have impact areas. That, you know, and it discusses that's for reasonable use. It's not a big change, but the big change is in 1.16.3 because now we have a reasonable use. Okay? So now you're going to have to toggle these 2 papers because the first sentence in this one, flu policy 1.16.4, says impacts to areas designated as conservation land use designation shall be considered if it is unavoidable due to the absence of feasible and or practical alternatives for reasonable use of the land. In other words, they don't have any reasonable use of the land. So they're gonna, what this says is, like Lieberman, you get to ask for impacts so that you're gonna have reasonable use of the land. Because he didn't have any 1.8%. He had nothing because he wanted multifamily. So what I want to know is if we put the reasonable use in there last time in 1.16.3, do we need to consider impacts if there's no reasonable use? If we have a reasonable use, does that part of the sentence need to be there? You know what? Do you get what I mean?
Sure. Why would you have this additional verbiage if it's already covered in 1.16.3 rather?
That is what, so
this is just additional wording that's not helpful.
okay, so you might think about striking part of that. What part would you what part there do you have a reason to consider getting rid of?
Or in the first sentence, we could say impacts to areas designated as conservation land use designation shall not be considered if it is unavoidable, and then follow.
Well,
That's one thought.
if we
Is there
break it-
another thought?
Yeah, if we break it apart, if it's unavoidable due to absence of feasible or practical alternatives for reasonable use of the land, well, we've already defined reasonable use. That's 1.8% of the land. Or the regulations create an inordinate burden on an existing use of the land or a vested right to a specific use of the land. Well, what kind of burden would we be creating if we've already got a predefined vested right of 1.8%?
I'll tell you what,
Why do we need them at all?
that's what we're going to discuss. Let me make a suggestion. I would say that you could get rid of if it is unavoidable due to the absence of feasible and/or practical alternatives for reasonable use of the land, because you already got that. Does that make sense? So if you got a pencil, you can cross out if it is unavoidable due to the absence of feasible and/or practical alternatives for reasonable use of the land. So we can get rid of that part, right?
Mhm.
So now, I'll let you all see if you can cross it out. Because that's just not the situation anymore. We got it covered. So, on to the next point, which is the tough one. Now, back to the paper, 2 changes to policy 1.16.4. I'd like you to read to yourself. We're going to talk about the clause that says, or the regulations create an inordinate burden on an existing use of land or a vested right to a specific use of the land. So I would ask you to read to the bottom of that page to yourself, and then we'll talk about it.
I feel like we talked about this at the last meeting. I don't see any part of that first sentence that seems to be necessary at all at this point. I mean, maybe some kind of introductory sentence to lead into the other part that we added, but it seems to me like we've done enough in the previous strategy to essentially just eliminate that opening sentence.
Any other comments?
No, I agree. I think the first sentence that we wrote down at the bottom section covers everything in the top.
I don't know if we're ready for a motion yet, or
Can I?
before we get to that.
Just let's go on, because we got to make sure we understand. All right, so. Okay, the city of Titusville has vested rights, procedures in the LDRs. You don't need this sentence to file a vested rights complaint. Vested rights is covered by Burt Harris, but the main thrust of Burt Harris Act is the inordinate burden, which is just a little bit beneath a taking of the land. So we had a meeting, Brad, Lily, and David, and, you know, actually, after the meeting with Brad, you know, David and Lily and I went down to the legal office, and I mentioned to David that Brevard County's vested rights section also has a Burt Harris little section. What these sections do is they tell you exactly what you need to do. Here's what you need for your evidence. Here's who you need to contact. Here's how you go about it. You know, and Titusville could easily add that. I mean, if they have a need to do something about Burt Harris, which they may or may not, it's a possibility. I mean, it's not like out of the realm, right? I mean, they'd have to think about it if they wanted to add it, but it certainly can be done. There's information only. You can file a Burt Harris challenge. You can file a vested rights challenge. It's just that Brevard County has procedures for both. They're kind of interlocked. Here's what you have to have, all the documents, you know, and all that, and what you do. But Titusville only has a vested right. So, I mean, if they want to put in some about vested rights, maybe they'd want to consider it there instead of right in the middle of future land use, targeting, of all things, conservation land use. I mean, that's my opinion. The big problem with filing a claim for under Burt Harris is the main hang-up that a landowner is going to have is that 5-acre rule. If they have a wetland that's 5 acres or greater in size, they are quite limited in what they can do. And that is old language. You know, I have the document from 1989 where, you know, it's in there, you know, it as a solution. So that was 89. 1995, July 1st is when Burt Harris Act went in. They have no ability to use against the 5-acre rule a Burt Harris claim, which is why it's so important to keep that 5-acre rule. We've got to keep it or these big wetlands may be toast over time. Hopefully we'll do something about keeping them. So now, if you'll turn over to the back of this, this is complicated. Okay, because we're discussing the clause that says, or due to significant site constraint or a practical design modification constraint. Now, doesn't that sound a little bit nebulous? Well, guess what? It's permitting language. Now, we're not supposed to be doing permitting in the first place. That's what we discussed last time. Let the water management district do it. So I know that this is complicated. So we'll go through a little bit of it. Okay, comment 2, this is my comment. The phrase significant site constraint and/or practical design modification constraint is similar to regulatory permitting language that has been in Florida permitting agencies' applicants' handbooks for many years, including 2008 and 2009, when the language in policy 1.16.4 was being revised. I ordered those just to make sure that you were seeing language similar to significant site constraint. Of course, it says practicable design modification in these handbooks. Now, here's something interesting. You wonder why we have land use planning. So I'd like you to read those two things indented by yourself. This is straight from the latest applicant's handbook of the district.
Perhaps next time if we do this, we could have the words up on the screen for people to see, because the dead space, dead air doesn't help people watching at home.
That's a great idea. Lily, we need to coordinate that.
I have the ones of the maps, but I didn't know this was gonna be presented.
Okay, yeah. We were kind of, yeah, I'll need to coordinate a little better with you. Sorry, but you know, we hardly knew what we were doing before yesterday's meeting. We were just winging it, right? Okay, so now, does that make sense? Or probably a little bit confusing, is it?
No, I like the original wording.
So, anyway, okay, you read the stuff from the applicant's handbook. So now, see that paragraph? It starts with basically. This is my comment on the district's language. Basically, what this language is implying is that in some cases, an applicant's project can be granted a permit even if it is not going to really meet the environmental criteria. You know? Because it says that modification can't be turned down. You can't just require them to do something totally different, you know? Anyway, it says this can happen if enough mitigation is offered. You know, it's somewhat of a, I shouldn't say this, but game, in my opinion. You know, because they offer enough mitigation and they can do it. And that's why we have to have the city's ability to do land use planning intact. And why the city's land use planning has to include the provision that large wetlands are limited and then their impacts to 1.8%.
I think the 1.8% could apply to all wetlands, actually. of any size,
Well,
because the
that-
5 acre
that is a
rule is a.
topic- That is a topic for the conservation element, which we do not want to get into now because the conservation land use does not necessarily cover all wetlands that are small. It covers the ones that are going to be preserved. And we had a discussion about that yesterday. I wanted to make absolutely sure. Okay. Now, it says this can happen if enough mitigation is offered. You remember that memo from Margaret Spontak? As Margaret Spontak stated in her memo, Partnership for Wetlands Protection, the need for land use planning and permitting. It is a losing proposition to attempt to achieve proper land use planning through a regulatory program. By the time a developer requests a permit application, it is too late for planning. All that can be done at this point is to minimize the negative impacts as best the regulatory agency can. The burden has been passed on to the permitting staff rather than dealt with as a land use policy and a natural resource protection policy in the comprehensive plan and implemented through local government land use development regulations. And then the last paragraph says Titusville's land use planning policies should not duplicate permitting policies of the regulatory agencies. Land use decisions should not involve evaluating whether wetlands impact can be considered due to significant site constraint and or practical design modification constraint. This is my opinion. Therefore, this phrase is not appropriate in Flu Policy 1.16.4, and that's what you're going to have to decide. If you think this language, starting with or the regulations create an inordinate burden on an existing use of land or vested rights to a specific use of land, or due to a significant site constraint or practical design modifications, that they can consider impacts. In other words, you got to decide if any of the rest of that first sentence should be there or if it's all unnecessary. The first part because they have a right to vested rights or Bert Harris challenges, and the second part because we don't want permitting language muddying our land use planning evaluation.
Member Miller?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna make a motion to strike through that complete first sentence of Flu Policy 1.16.4.
I'll second that. I can do that as the chair. Any discussion, please?
I have a question. Why not strike the entire policy, the last sentence too? Permitting process conducted by all the regulatory agencies within the jurisdiction?
Oh, that's struck through. It's where
Oh, you're right, it's already
Yeah.
strike through.
you're fixed to it
Thank you.
starts at no wetlands.
This removes the remainder of what was 1.16.4. The only thing that I would add to the discussion is this the place where we should put not just residential, but also commercial and industrial?
Yeah, I'm not there. I got
You're not
this.
there yet. Okay. All right.
That's coming right up.
I'm
Next
just
paper.
ahead of you again. All right. Anybody else? Any questions? All right, we got a motion. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Young? Yes. Member Delgado?
Yes.
Member Nico?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Chairman Majak?
Yes. All righty. We have dispatched with 1.16.4. Is there anything we need to do back at 1.16.3, or are we done
Yeah,
with
let
that?
me get my act together.
Okay.
I'm terrible with, when I get too many papers, on the desk. Some people are organized, not me.
Stan's example.
Okay, we got that. Okay, got that. Got that. Okay, so, Lily, what do they have, back there? Do they have three
Just
different
the-
maps?
Yeah, the maps that you provided, and I believe that can be brought up on the screen.
Okay, in the meantime, we're gonna, get another paper passed out. There you go. Can you, can he pull up the first map, Lily, or I don't know how to
Which map?
ask for, yes. Wait a minute, that's the second one. Can he pull up the one that's Huntington Park? Does he have Huntington Park?
I don't know.
Yes, yes, thank you. Okay. What I want to show you is, if you, did you get a map here? Okay, Huntington Park.
I got it. Yeah.
We've looked at it before.
Yeah.
Several times.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Even when Brad was here.
now, you got one, David? Yeah. Okay, so, what I want to show you, this is a major developer here, MBV. I want to show you that MBV Engineering knows exactly how to use that 1.8%. And I think they voluntarily did. They got a huge amount of wetlands. Now, right in the middle, there's a bridge between the northeastern part and the western part of their development. And they, in order to, be able to get in and out of the western part, they obviously needed some access, which they're providing over the wetlands. They got some sort of bridge. And it says public right-of-way typical. Okay? Well, guess what? How much do you think they filled? Percent of those wetlands.
No idea.
Well, by your little paper, I would guess 1.8%.
That's and it is exact. Amazingly. It's exact. They knew what they were doing. I'd like to, and they may have come in under conditional uses because we didn't really have a provision for subdivisions, but they know how to use that percent. So I think they may be very happy to have this allowance. The other thing you might want to notice is that they, unlike Lieberman, they have, okay, you see that kind of brownish one, which is the wetlands? Bordering that is a light green, and then a darker green, and then the streets, you know. But that light green is some sort of buffer. Can somebody read that fine print? Buffer, open space. Is that what it says? Okay. I know I need new glasses. Okay, so now they got a buffer. They got a buffer all around this. So do you think they have any secondary impact? They have any secondary impacts to any neighboring properties? No, they don't, because they got a buffer. Because they may have some impacts, but the water management district says this buffer's enough. But not in Lieberman, if you remember, they were impacting with their secondary impacts the property to the south, which was not good. And I think we discussed before that they have compensatory storage because they're in the floodplain. And you can see they have a bunch of trees there. Tree preservation recreation tract. They did not fall under the tree ordinance, but they did this voluntarily. And they would have actually qualified for the incentives. So, I mean, this is not rocket science to these engineering firms like MBV. And now we're going to look at another one. The second map, if they can draw it up. Oh, I forgot to tell you on the first map. Here it says, do the wetland limitations apply? It is conservation land, yes. Huntington Park, yes. But there is no impacts to any lots on this. None. No lots are impacted by wetlands. Okay? Now, Verona Village, that's Verona Village D, right? Is there?
Yes.
That looks like it's C. No, or wait a minute.
No, it's D.
D, okay. Okay, so do we have a printout of Verona Village D? Because I don't have it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That helps. Okay. Yeah, this is very helpful that I can see it here. Thank you. Okay, so in Village D, you'll notice that gray, the gray is the wetlands impacts, and you can see some like on a road, mostly on roads. Oh, thank you. We'll give David back. So take a look at that. So The wetland impact, guess what? It's 1.8% of the, it's not of the conservation land use because Verona is a special case. I don't know how this exactly all happened, but they got out of their conservation land use. They should have conservation land use on this, on the wetlands in this. They should have it. Because like this white one up at the top, that's a huge wetland. They have huge wetlands. But what happened is in 2016, they changed to planned development or planned unit development. Anyway, it's one of those land use categories. They should never have gotten out of into that category, in my opinion, because of strategy 1.6.3.2 of the conservation element. But what's done is done, and we're not going to waste our time trying to figure out how they did it. But nevertheless, this is Honeycutt and Associates, another huge firm here developing. They have 0 houses sited in wetlands. There may be a just very slight impact to some lots, very, very slight. And they did not have to comply with any wetlands limitation because they do not have the conservation land use. They have PD zoning, but they don't have conservation land use. They have they have I think they have PUDZ zoning, which was way back then, and PUD, I don't know land use, I could be wrong, but anyway, the wetlands impact limitations of 1 unit per 5 acres do not apply. But guess what? Their engineer voluntarily limited the wetlands impacts to 1.8%. He knows just what to do. He just doesn't push the envelope. Okay? So they can do it. This is my point. They know how to do it. They're not. They may not be upset at all by this 1.8%. They may think, okay, this is going to tell me what to do and I can handle this. I hope that's what they think. That make sense?
Yes.
Now, let's go on to the next one. Verona Village D. A different company. Now, note, they are not bound by the conservation land use, 1 unit per 5 acres, and not in any way. So guess you can see this gray here. They got gray on various lots in that third map. Everybody seen that? So, wetlands impacts. It looks like they didn't voluntarily decide to stick to 1.8%. Maybe it just didn't occur to them, or maybe, guess what? They wanted to, I shouldn't say, pack the maximum amount of houses that they could in there, which is not uncommon. You know that. So the number of houses sited in wetlands, that excludes the impacts on the edges of lots, is not 0 like the other two, but 11, which tells you that some companies might voluntarily do what they think is the right thing to do, and others, I mean, they may think that impacting a bunch of lots is the right thing to do. I have no idea, but they have a different perspective, let's put it that way. And this is a problem if you lose the conservation land use designation. Does that make sense? If you don't have a conservation land use designation, you have no restrictions on how much of that wetland you can impact. It's up to the water management district. So, are you ready to talk about the policy now? All right, I gotta tell, let me put this stuff away. I just gonna be better organized. Okay. Now, I want to make sure you all understand this situation here. So wait just a second. Okay, so here's the deal. We had a meeting yesterday, Brad, David, and Lily, and myself, okay? You know that language you suggest? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll get this in 1 sec. Okay. I'll pass this out in 1 sec. Let me just tell you what happened in the meeting. Okay, so I gave Brad your language. Well, and I've told him, you know, this is what he suggested, and you passed it for 1.16.3. And I had just a little bit, one more sentence added to it. And then he's looking at it again, you know, giving it a second look, and he thinks it's got too many words. And it might not be sticking to one topic. So we got to present some alternatives to him. And I got 2 alternatives. And I suggest that you consider having Brad look into both. Okay? The first one is a small tweak of what you did last time based on the email from Darcy, who suggested that, who said that the county evaluates this 1.8% project by project. So let me get this handed out. Oh, sorry, David. You should be. Okay, let me. Okay, when you get that, like I say, I really appreciate the question, because if we're gonna do this project by project, I think we need to make those changes as it now reads with a strike through and underline. It's just moving some words around in that policy. If you can read that to yourself.
Why don't you read it out loud for the people at home, Mary?
Sure. Allowable uses within the conservation land use area shall be limited to residential uses of 1 unit per 5 acres, conservation, recreation, open space, and stormwater management system consistent with the policies of the conservation element and the land development regulations. The preceding limitation of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres within the conservation land use category may be applied as a maximum percentage, limiting wetland impacts to not more than 1.8% of each residential development's total conservation land use on a cumulative basis. Commercial and industrial uses are not permissible in the conservation land use category. And the reason I'm suggesting this change is to clarify that the 1.8% is to be applied project by project, just like Darcy in the county do. It's going to make it much easier, and it was not clear that we were applying it project by project the way we had it before.
I see.
While we're on that, can I suggest that we take the S off developments? If you want to do it case by case.
It's singular then.
1.8% of each residential development's total conservation land use.
Oh, possessive.
Yeah.
I know, I think it's what's confusing is I got that I got too much underline there.
Okay.
Sorry. I need to remove that. I'll remove that underline. Let's pretend it's removed. So you would need to consider that, making that change to your recommendation in a motion if you think that's good. And then we'll go on to the strategy.
So the only recommendational change then is really this is going to be for per project on a case-by-case basis.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And to give Brad this exact language with the change there. That you're just tweaking your recommendation from last time to be this.
Okay. Member Miller?
Yeah, I would make a motion to accept the change to 1.16.3 as has been proposed here.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Miller and a second by Member Tucker. Any further discussions?
I have
Yes,
a question.
Member Delgado?
Mary, we have 2 Verona's examples
Yes,
by 2 different engineering companies.
correct. I get it, yeah.
Apparently, not that we want to stop that at all, but we have 2 different results.
We have 2 different what?
Results from the 2 same project. Verona, the
Oh, yeah,
Excuse me.
yeah, exactly.
versus B.
Yes, correct.
So when we're talking project by project, is that implied, and this is more for the attorney also, that Verona is a project?
No,
And
each
if I break it
each
down-
village would be a project, but here's the deal. They do not have conservation land use. They have a different kind of land use, which they somehow managed to get in 2016.
Okay, they got it.
And so they don't have to follow the rules. Yeah, one company did. And one company, I'll say, pushed the envelope.
Yeah.
Because I think, you can see the number of 11 lots impacted by wetlands.
But where I'm going is, if we're sticking with policy, then the whole thing is to avoid that example. Where
Exactly.
2 Veronas are handled different,
Exactly.
and not only different by the body that approved it, but also by two engineering companies.
Correct.
Finding different solutions to the same verbiage.
Well, but they weren't obligated by the verbiage of one unit per 5 acres because they got out of it. They have a different land use. If you go into the future land use element, it's that one that has to do with plan development or something like that. Maybe you can find it. Just hold on a second. He's going to see if he can find it on his computer.
Mary, is it PUD, plan use development?
If it's in the future land use, is that it?
Okay, so therefore, the
And it should give the PUDs, and there's 4 of them down at the end of that.
okay, of the project.
Believe it's objective 1.19. But I think the point here is that since neither of those projects were subject to the conservation land use area, none of the verbiage that we are tweaking now or that is in place now was applicable to those projects at the time that they were developed. So what we're doing now wouldn't have applied to those projects at the time, but projects that are in the conservation land use area only.
If you have any questions for the attorney, please ask him because
Well, as a follow-on to that, so how did they get there?
I'm not familiar with
I mean,
the nature of
you
those
know,
projects
it's the same
specifically.
body that is approving, basically. Okay, it was the same set of rules.
no, it wasn't the same.
No, not today, but back then, the rules were made differently, and
They
then,
were several years apart.
right, they may be several years apart, but just basically the same people are still there. I mean, I find the logic to go the way that they found a way around it, because
Okay.
because the policy was not enforced, therefore they were not under.
The reason
we're
they're
trying
not
to do.
under,
How do I avoid that?
okay, yeah, how do you avoid that? By your fix to 1.16.3, but they have just flown the coop. They got out of it, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Can't put
At
it
the
back.
end of that policy, you should see that there's 4 developments, big projects that are PUDs. But what happened is, as far as those village D and B, D happened in 20, when was it? Anyway, I can't exactly remember, but I think it was 2023, the spring, and B, the one with all the impacts, happened after D. It was just 2 different engineering firms. And, I'm not saying that they all didn't know what Titusville was trying to do with 1 unit per 5 acre. I'm sure they did, but they, the rules just didn't apply to them, and we got to make sure that we, get these rules tightened up so they're not loopholes. And that's exactly why you deleted in 1.16.2, unless that wording that says, unless such wetlands are preserved by a conservation easement as part of a planned development or other master plan development. Because they can get, they could, I mean, they got out before that caveat was even written, but I mean, bygones are going to be bygones. We just don't, you can see from the bygones, you want to close this close this loophole and in all the wetlands that are 5 acres or greater in size, have to be in conservation land use.
Do we need to repeat that? Because what happened is we need to learn from history. It's already happened. I'm not advocating going back.
No, we're not going back.
That's how, I don't work that way, but I do learn from that.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So we
there- and
learned,
so therefore, what I'm looking at is trying to get a dialogue that says, do we have enough in the policy right now to prevent this happening? That's
well,
a question that I could, in my mind, I cannot answer yet.
that's why we're tweaking this one too. We are tweaking this one too. And we're gonna go back and look at 1.16.2 again, but I haven't got enough information to do it. We're trying
I'm
to
going to
tighten.
suggest a possible solution or possible reason that this happened, and it's the same reason for the land swap that happened at Holloway's property that Brad brought to us a few weeks ago. When the land's in the county and it's brought into the city, it doesn't matter whether it's wet or dry. It doesn't matter whether the county has it as a state zoning or a zippy mart. When it comes in and gets annexed into the city, it's virgin land and they get to make it what they want. And if they did not make it conservation, then you have what we have. That's what they crafted. So fixing how we annex property and actually addressing wetlands that we annex as conservation land needs to be looked at as well.
Great idea.
Because that's how this came in. That's how Holloway's came in. They annexed that land and said, oh, this isn't estate planning. We'll just use the 1 unit per acre. And they applied it to the wetlands as well. So instead of 1 per 5, it was 1 per 1.
Boy, that's a great idea.
Well, that was my point.
Yeah.
We need to be able to close the gates. Now, whether it be annexation or whether it be,
That's the only time it's not defined.
Okay.
Once it's annexed, it has a definition. It has a land use and it has a zoning. But it has to come in first and get annexed first. And what that gets annexed as, that's the real question.
and that may be the solution, but we need to look
We
at that.
definitely need to
That's a-
look at
that's a door
that
that's
in
open somewhere.
in a future meeting. Okay, so should we go right on to the strategy?
Yes.
Don't we have
Okay.
a motion?
Oh, we have a motion and a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a motion, a second. We need a vote, right?
We do. Is there any other discussion? Just to be sure? No? Okay. So the motion is on the replacement of 1.16.3.
Member Nico?
Yes.
Member Delgado?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Young?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Chairman Majak?
Yes. Okay, we dispatched with that one. Now, we have a
We have
new
a
one.
strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there were 2 sentences in there, and this had not been run by staff. This is what I wrote the morning before the last meeting. To try to make it appear to an applicant that the 1.8% was not just some entitlement, that they could do anything with it. This first sentence, impact to wetlands and conservation land use in the conservation land use category shall not cause secondary impacts to adjacent properties. That's fine. Okay, now, staff, and this includes Lily, you know, and when we were having a discussion, David and Lily, and, and Brad, I think, made the comment, they're gonna have some sort of stormwater, big workshop and stuff. And if we start talking about compensatory storage at this point in time, it might be premature. We might wanna just, you know, put that, you know, on the table and save it for later and not include it with our recommendation, because we don't know what is gonna be done with the language about the compensatory storage in the 100-year floodplain, because I know, I think Michael mentioned this last time, and Lily mentioned it. Now they're looking at inundation areas instead of just the 100-year floodplain. And I think David and Lily were talking about how, boundaries of wetlands change and all this. So it might be more prudent to just delete that last sentence and just have our strategy be the first sentence, which, like, you can't just impact your neighbor.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
are we gonna have to define inundation areas?
No,
Inundation
no,
area-
no. Yeah,
Because-
no, all we're doing is putting off, all we're doing is removing, that and letting some other people discuss it. We're just not getting in their hair and trying to, make a policy when they're working on something. It's wrong, the timing is wrong.
Right.
Let's be courteous, you know what I mean? Let them do their thing, and then we'll, I'm sure you'll be looking at it as a
We can
team.
always add another strategy 1.16.3.2 that just addresses the compensatory storage issue and not mollicks it up.
Right, you could
with
always do
impacts
that
to-
too.
Right.
But all I'm saying is that when this goes back to Brad, you might want to just have it be one sentence long.
So Laura Lee brought this up briefly at the last meeting. She mentioned that inundation areas is the thing that we're looking at now instead of floodplains. And it also came up several times on Saturday at the community conference.
Right.
I think this makes a lot of sense because as you just pointed out, like once they get the stormwater management plan updated, the verbiage that is in that will be what we then want to add to this. So by cutting that out now, we're saving ourselves work down the road as well. So I would move to strike out that second sentence of 116.3.1 that we had included at the last meeting.
Second.
Good. Got a motion and a second. The strategy will read impacts to wetlands and conservation land use category shall not cause secondary impacts to adjacent properties. Any other discussions? Hearing none, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Young? Member Delgado?
Yes.
Member Nico?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Chairman Majak?
Yes. Okay. I can't stuff any more papers in my binder.
Well, you're gonna have to have one more, and that's it.
Oh dear.
One
I need a
more.
bigger binder.
So I
What's
got
next?
that one away. Well, let me tell you about this one. So, when you're trying to solve a problem, it always helps to have an alternative, right? So we got this motion you made, which is, in my opinion, very good, okay? But now, since Brad, he's got a couple things on his mind. Too wordy, and maybe more than one topic, okay? So guess what? We got to have something else to have him look at. Now, I'm not going to ask you to vote on this. I'm going to just ask you if it's okay that I give this to Brad. And I want you to know what's going on. No surprises. No surprise. We don't know what Brad's going to say, but it's best to have an alternative, right? That's not too wordy and may have only one topic per whatever, right? So that's what we're going to consider now, and I got some new topics. So, anyway, the policy that we want is what you just, is based on the wording you just voted to accept with some words out of it. So let me go ahead. Pass this out. So what I want you to read is that first policy. You'll notice it's quite a bit shorter because we aim to please.
Back to the future land use element.
Okay, so I'm going to read this in case, because Lily had suggested it. Okay, this one's shorter. Allowable uses within the conservation land use area shall be limited to residential units, uses of 1 unit per 5 acres. Now, I took out the word, conservation and passive recreation. Now, I took out open space because obviously it's going to be open space. And I took out stormwater management system because guess what? Guess who had their stormwater management system, their stormwater ponds right next to the wetland, if not in the wetland, Lieberman. And it was, so I think and passive recreation is what I think they have in mind for this, just like in the EELS program, And then, okay, I got rid of consistent with the policies of the conservation element and the land development regulations. You can put those side by side and see that this is less wordy. If you want it less wordy, here's something less wordy. It says a preceding limitation of, I just put the limitation of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, and then I got rid of within the conservation land use category. And it says may be applied as a maximum percentage, limiting wetland impact to not more than 1.8% of each residential development's total conservation land use on a cumulative basis. Now, the one where he thought there was 2 topics was commercial and industrial uses are not permissible in the conservation land use category. He thought that was another topic, so we're going to split it out. Wait a minute, what did I do here? Okay, so the first strategy, I don't know if he wants this in there or not, because I don't know if people know that think this is obvious, but if you get a small impact, you're still in the conservation land use. That's up to him. I don't know if he thinks that needs to be stated or not. Who knows? Does that make sense? Any questions about policy 1.16.3 or strategy 1.16.3.1?
Where are you gonna put the industrial commercial?
And 1.16.3.3.
Okay.
All right, now, the next one may need to be tweaked, the wording a little, but I think everybody wants, if they're gonna impact this wetland, we wanted to save the remaining part of the wetland. I mean, if they make a small impact and are planning on making a larger impact as a cumulative impact a little later, you know, you may have to put some about, you know, proportional or something, I don't know. I'm gonna let him deal with that. But anyway, this one says mitigation for allowed impacts for residential development. Notice it says for residential development in wetlands. Designated as conservation land use shall consist of preservation and maintenance of remaining wetland acreage. That makes sense? That first sentence. That's what we want, right?
I just cut the word residential.
Oh, no, I wouldn't.
It's generic then.
You know what?
It says elsewhere it's residential. It's
I
only
know,
applied,
I know.
But here it would be generic and that would be useful later on.
No, we only want residential impacts. We don't want any other impacts. We do not want, the other kind of impacts is industrial and commercial. We do not want those. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but by removing the word residential, then this could apply to those as well.
By keeping the word residential,
Or we could add industrial and commercial.
no, we don't want them. You're joking, you're joking. Michael's trying to pull my leg. You didn't get away with it.
So it's implied that when it says remaining wetland acreage, that's per request. Like, they're not gonna mitigate somewhere else. It's gonna be on this
Exactly.
property. Okay.
Exactly, because I was looking at one of these, I think it was Village B, and they were gonna, you know, just buy credits. And those credits are mostly out of the county now. That's not what we want.
Is that strong enough language to get the point across?
Uh,
That it won't be off-site?
This, I could put the word on site. Meaning, wait. I don't know, because we just want that, if there's two wetlands, we want, like if they're impacting one, I don't know, let me think about if I want to put the word on site, I'll put a question mark. Because, you know, this is just, it's not something you got to vote on. As far as your recommendation, I suggest you don't, because this is too fluid. I'll look at it before we meet. Okay, so, and then it says the required preservation shall at a minimum be proportional to the cumulative wetland impacts. I don't know if that's good language or not.
I'm trying to think of what the advantage is of that. What does that really do?
Well, this is, what I'm thinking is if they only impact a little, they're only required to save, you know, a certain amount. And then if they, you know, if on that particular project, the impact a little more, just a little later, they would have to save the whole wetland, you know.
Well, let's say the project also has an additional 100 acres of wetlands associated with it, besides maybe 5 that they've impacted. They need to maintain the 105 acres, the 5 they've impacted and the 100, not just the 5.
Well, it's dependent not on how much they, not what wetlands, the percentage of the percentage. Like, how much of the 1.8%? I think this needs to be discussed, like, with the attorney before we take it. I mean, this is just a thought. I mean, we'll have to figure this out, okay?
Mary, it's beyond that, because when you use the word proportionally, you're talking math. You're not talking words. Okay, and so you really have to run every case. just
You're right.
about,
You're absolutely right.
Starting with 1% to 100%.
You're absolutely right, and you have to tell.
And see how
yeah.
you're gonna deal with that, because otherwise, I can gain that. My engineering
Maybe
company
we
can
should
gain
just stop and say, yeah, you know, if we leave it, conservation land use shall consist of preservation and maintenance of remaining wetland acreage. Leave it at that and then say, and shall be documented by deed restriction. How about that?
The required preservation shall be documented by deed restriction is clear enough.
Does that sound good? Get rid of the troublesome.
Well, the word proportionality, you're asking for math, and I can go and gain that
Yes.
easily.
Yeah, I think you got a point. So,
Okay. So we're gonna strike at a minimum,
Re-
be
okay.
proportional to the cumulative wetland impacts and shall.
so we're gonna strike, yeah.
Remain,
We have
leaving
required preservation shall be documented by
deed
deed
restriction.
restriction. Did you get that email I sent you this morning about the deed restriction?
I did. I actually had a comment about that. I think for the purposes of the goals that this body's trying to reach, getting a conservation easement executed in favor of the city would be more beneficial than a deed restriction, because the conservation easement also allows for access by the city to inspect.
But the conservation easement isn't permanent.
If it's in favor of the city would be the only party that would be able to release it, so we.
It's, well, for all essential purposes, then permanent.
Unless the city chooses to go another way, but at least then we wouldn't be relying on some third party maintaining it. The city would have control.
Right.
So what we need to do is have that, you know, is some deed restriction or
Conservation land use.
Tell you what, David, what conservation
Conservation easement,
Conservation easement.
because there's,
And what should you say, but it's, you said something about the city, what was that wording?
language I would use would be conservation easement executed in favor of the city of
Okay,
Titusville.
hold on, executed in favor of the city.
I don't want to go down a huge rabbit hole on this, but just a quick question. Would the city council in the future be able to vote to cancel that easement?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I have a question, that if it says by deed restriction, how do you know that they actually do that? I mean, where do you go to, you know, if we're voting or the planning committee is looking at this and saying you gotta do a deed restriction, does somebody come back and check it's done? Where does it say that somebody needs to verify that?
Obviously, that's language that could be worked on, but the issue also with it, and it would be recorded, you could check by seeing once the deed is recorded if the restriction's been added, but the difficulty with a deed restriction is enforceability, because typically with deed restrictions, the only third party having enforceability rights would be somebody owning a benefited land, and since the city doesn't own any adjacent property, it would be difficult to argue that the city has independent enforcement rights of that restriction. That's why the conservation easement in favor of the city gives the city both enforcement rights and entry and inspection rights.
And if I remember from our conversation, a conservation easement can be used to provide a tax incentive to the property owner, right?
They should receive a reduced assessed value, although because the land is already classified as a means on which they couldn't develop, that would probably be pretty minimal. Their assessed value on the land is going to be low to start with because currently it's unbuildable.
Right.
But there
No more
are
than
some
one for 5
federal,
acres.
there are some possible federal tax implications that I'm not an expert in federal tax law, but there's possible tax benefits, yes.
I have land that's a conservation easement, and it took a lot of paperwork and money to get it changed and put onto the deed. So that's, I mean, the effort it's gonna take, verifying that done. I mean, I made sure it's done because I was the one doing it. Here, you've got a developer doing it, and I'm not sure how much control we have over that.
My understanding is that that usually gets handed over to an HOA at the time that the PUD is finished. But
So are we leaving deed restriction in or striking it out?
Should we put and or something, or and or something?
For the goals that I believe the body's trying to achieve, my recommendation would be to delete the deed deed restriction language and include only conservation easement language.
Yes.
And I can work with Mary on draft language to tighten all
Yeah.
that up with the concerns that have been
We
raised.
don't want the
perfect.
city, deciding they're gonna release it. That's my only fear. But if they release it, maybe we could, I don't know, we'll work, we'll figure this out, something like that, okay?
okay,
And then strategy 1.16.3.3, you know that other paper I gave you, the first one, where is it? Okay, it's policy, 1.16.4, where you marked that, where you got rid of the first sentence. On the back of it, I'm gonna refer to this policy, flu policy 1.21.1. Oh, it's not the partial, sorry. I thought it was gonna do the partial. This is the whole thing. This is a policy that gives densities or intensities of use for each future land use category. You see it?
Mhm.
Okay. You can look down, the third from the bottom is conservation, third line.
yep,
The objective is 1.16, the density, that's the residential use, is 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. The intensity is a non-residential use. It says NA, guess why? Because there's no commercial or industrial allowed there. That's been in there since 2010, I know. I try to, the state site's a little sketchy as far as all the documentation they have from all the amendments in certain local governments, and I just couldn't find anything earlier than 2010 for this thing, so. Anyway, but we know it's in the comp plan right now, okay? So let's use this to our advantage and, if that says we're only supposed to have 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, then that's what we're supposed to have, right? Consistent, so this strategy says consistent with policy 1.21.1, which states density and intensity limitations. Commercial and industrial uses are not permissible in the conservation land use category, which is what we wanted in the first place, right? And then the last one is a strategy, that first sentence from the strategy, impact that we had, impacts to wetlands and conservation land use category shall not cause secondary impacts to adjacent properties. So what I'm hoping you'll do in the next 5 minutes is not really take a vote, but just kind of, maybe we can have an informal raise of hands if you think this is okay to bring your language and this one to Brad, so we can start a conversation about where we're gonna go, that there's more alternative, you can't just, let's just open our, vision, and see, let's see what we can do that we can all agree on. And that's what I'm hoping.
I don't have any problem with this going to Brad.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't have any problem with the conversation. I will say the 1.16.3.3 seems irrelevant to me. Just because we have, I feel like we're just referencing the same, like, we're referencing two different policies back and forth off each other. So it's repetitive, and if we're talking about trying to reduce verbiage, then that seems like a place to reduce verbiage to me. Not saying it's a hill I'm gonna die on or anything, it's just my initial thoughts, that's not really relevant.
Oh, this is 1.16.3. Oh, yeah. But we don't have it in my, you have it in yours. You have it in yours. But I took it out of mine. I moved it because Brad said there's two topics, in this, and we want one topic per thing. That's why I moved it. I moved it from the last sentence, like you got it, to its own strategy, and I, gave it some, yeah. Yeah, I just moved it because,
Okay, I missed that. I missed that you had taken it out of the other part.
Yeah.
I understand.
So it sounds like we need to go back and.
maybe if people just, just like you said, you said you don't have a problem with, if we can get, more opinions of whether people have or do not have a problem with this going to Brad as well as your motions, then we'll be done.
I don't think there's a problem with that at all. Everything that I've heard so far, we need to be in sync with our city staff, so it's perfectly fine that we hear his concerns and incorporate them as well. Okay? We'll
How
go
about
back-
the other people on the, we've heard from Beth Ann, Michael, and Jason. What about John, Hector, and Bill? Are you okay with that?
Yeah. I hear no objections, Mary.
You okay?
No, I think we're at a point where
Okay,
we need to take it and
Okay.
send it.
okay,
Get some feedback.
Get
and
some
start-
feedback.
'cause-
exactly. Okay, thanks a lot. I don't know if anybody knows, it said something about, oh, yeah, because I'm not going home 50, I'm going garden. So that won't be a problem getting on the 95. Okay. Thanks so much for all your
All right.
attention, et
Thank you,
cetera.
Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
I'll see you next week, and not, in 2 weeks, excuse me, 2 weeks. Hopefully you have some input.
That means we get to move on to new business. Oi. And just how much new business do we have? There is nothing on the agenda for new business. So, I guess that brings us back to petitions and requests. Seeing none, then we will move on to our member reports. Anybody do anything interesting the last couple of weeks?
Well, as was so with the rest of you, I went to the community conference on Saturday. Lily did a fantastic job with that, as did all the presenters. I would say my only disappointment is that I didn't get to see all the presentations, and I had to pick, one of the three for each session. But I thought it was really good, and I think that one of the things that was really neat in my eyes is afterwards, when we were having lunch, got to sit and talk with some people that are new to the area and didn't understand a lot of the processes. Mike, I think you were sitting there with me talking to the one woman. And so I thought that was neat that we had some new citizens there that were able to learn more about some of these city processes, and how much all the presenters like harped on that. Like they all said repeatedly, like, this is how you can get involved. We want to hear from you. You can come to these meetings, or this, that, or the other thing, apply for this thing. So I thought it was really good. I thought it was a really good thing. And I know they talked about doing another one next year. My thing would be, and Lily, I know this is probably unlikely, but do one sooner than that. You know, if maybe the momentum from this and the people that did attend could get more people there that aren't already involved with the city, because, you know, I think most of us were there, I think. But that's what it was. Most of the people I recognized from other city engagements. So, you know, to maybe capitalize on those few people that were new to the processes sooner than a year might be good to get more of those citizens that aren't already involved.
Excellent.
I thought.
Member Delgado?
Now, the only thoughts on that is that we do have a lot of snowbirds. And so therefore, it's February, March, and a lot of them are here, but come September, they may not. And so we may have a different set of people. And so maybe think about doing it twice a year. I know, Lily,
I thought the snacks were pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
Life was great.
do you have a report, Bill?
A report?
Anything you did this week?
I agree with him about the conference. I thought it was not attended as well as I thought it should be. So I'm not sure how to do that except stand on the street corner with a sign that says, "I'm hungry. Come to our meeting and we'll feed you."
Community development for food, huh?
Yeah, so, but Earth Day is coming up, and
Yes.
I don't know if we want to do something for Earth Day or not, and make an awareness of it and talk about it. So
We used to
that's.
attend at the Enchanted Forest every Earth Day. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Enchanted Forest has an activity. They have a big event with exhibitors. Mary's, Kay's usually at the other one with her exhibit. I don't know that we have an exhibit there, but we may want to make somehow the people know that there is such a thing as a TEC. Because when I talk to people around town and I tell them about this, they go, "What?" And I don't think we get any very much publicity. We've had certain people in the past years come and discuss things that affects them, but I think a lot of people don't know we exist. And and so that conference we had last weekend, there should have been a table for us to show people that we are doing this. There's a number of environmental groups around, and we should be somehow getting them more involved with us. But maybe we don't, because we don't want anybody out there arguing with us. So it's easier this way with no audience fighting you. But
So is that a motion for us to attend, the TEC that is, to attend Earth Day Festival at the Enchanted Forest? We have a pop-up and a table and banner and stuff.
okay, I so move that they're full for this year, but next year, for us to make up an exhibit to present at
They're full?
the Earth Day next year at the.
What's wrong with this year?
I asked him, I was going to put an exhibit there for another group I'm with. I'm with a group at our church called Creation Care, where we're trying to save the earth, because the Bible says to save the earth, and we should be stewards. And we were going to put an exhibit there, and they said, "We're already full. We already have all the exhibitors we can handle."
Oh, boy. Well, that's
So-
news to me. I'm on the board there, too.
You're on the board there, so you
Yeah.
can make room for us?
I'm the vice chair of the Enchanted Friends of the Forest, yeah.
Well, then I move that we can either get in this year, or at least do next year,
I can try to.
a table, a
We
booth,
should
and a
be able
handout.
to find space.
Yeah.
And
I
I'd like to.
I got Laura Lee to do a presentation, so they're gonna have to find us space.
Okay.
So,
I do want to loop in, we were in it last year, and I'm surprised Teresa hasn't reached out. So I I was waiting for that, honestly. I'm kind of surprised to hear it's full too. I'll ask her though.
Yeah, let's
We've
follow up
been
with
in it.
that, because it's the 18th. It's just the middle of next month, so there's not a
Yeah.
whole lot of time.
And I'd like to see us get a flyer, a one-pager or a folder thing that says what we do to hand out to people that could sit in the lobby downstairs, and when we go to events, we could give it to people that tell them who we are and what we do and how they can interact with us. It'd just be a one page, very simple, but we need to make ourselves more aware, make the world or the city more aware of us.
Sure. Make us more accessible to the citizens, too. Good
Well,
idea.
I just want to say to that point, I think most of us attended the Nano Bubble project, and it would have been nice to maybe have had like a name tag for those who didn't know we were part of the TEC.
I ordered those.
Oh, you did? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. No,
Yeah,
that was just my suggestion. I didn't know if we got those or not, but that would have been a good
Are
way
they
for
going to be the
people to
nice
know.
gold ones like they have on the other committees?
Should we get
I'll have to
T-shirts?
ask Lori.
Do we want T-shirts
be
or
getting
hats
them,
with TEC on it?
There we go. We can represent. No report? Yeah, I was going to talk about the bubbler for sure. I mean, that's a big deal, which it's just yet unproven technology. I think that's what's the most exciting thing to me is that we're cautiously optimistic. I got a chance to talk with Dr. Austin Fox, who did the preliminary analysis of the muck underneath that area, and found that it was just atrocious. And while the way this, you think of bubbles always rising, but these bubbles are so small, they just stay suspended in the water column, and their surface tension has enough push to want them to separate some, so they naturally disperse horizontally through the water column. That's great. It fills the entire space. The trouble is that it presses against the muck, but it doesn't actually penetrate into the muck. It's a surface contact thing. So the amount of absorption and oxygenation is only going to occur at that surface layer. And you don't want to stir it up because you don't want the muck to be dispersed through the lagoon. So what he's looking at in the future is something similar, but using electrolysis and applying the probes directly into the muck itself, causing the oxygen-hydrogen dispersion to occur locally. And that then puts the oxygen in the middle of the muck, which is where it'll have the most positive effect. So they're going to be doing this for 6 months. Then they're going to do an analysis for 6 months and figure out, how good it is, whether it's been effective and how so. And then we'll know. So it'll be about a year.
Would that eliminate that top layer from being disturbed?
I believe so. And it's a question of how much it will degrade and erode. And the thinking is that, the material's there for it to oxygenate, which is what it needs. The question is how long and, what's the other activities that go along with it that make it functional, productive. So anyway, that remains to be seen, but was a great effort by the city and personally by Laura Lee. So kudos to her. I don't have anything else. Do we want to talk about things to put on a future agenda item tonight?
I
Yes.
feel like we
No,
got
yeah,
enough
I
things.
just wanted to make sure we hit the future agenda item portion specifically. So, yeah, you were going in the right direction.
Yep. Let's do that now. Things that you're thinking about, or are you too tired to?
Well, I'll
Please.
add to that. So your dual meetings for the month, the last one will be, I believe, in April 30th. So you have
Right.
the March 26th, April 15th, and April 30th. It has also come to my attention about the status of Senate Bill 180 might not be getting the fix that we were banking on during this legislative session. And David can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is on hold. So if that's something, if TEC wants to continue the wetland conversation throughout, the year, however long you want to talk about it, but also council has put on your agenda a couple other items, and I believe some TEC members have expressed other interests as
Yes.
well. So I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page for the next 3 agenda items. Are we doing wetlands all the way through April, or are you Oh, obviously the next one's going to have the brackish water as well.
Right. How much longer do you think we're going to need? Another 2 or 3 meetings?
Okay, so the next one's gonna have the what now?
The brackish water desalinization, yeah, tool from Public Works. That was before council is coming to TEC.
Okay, so when is this gonna happen, the next meeting?
That'll be at the next meeting, yeah.
So there won't be wetlands discussion?
That's
Oh,
up
yeah,
to
there
the
will.
board.
There will.
Okay,
do
so-
both.
So maybe a shorter one.
Yes.
Okay, so, yes, what I
Maybe
had
we can get some
planned-
feedback too.
What I planned is, and I've really been trying to bear down on it and make sure we can complete, what we have to resolve this, the policies, 1.16.3 with Brad, and then get his okay on 1.16.4. 1.16.2 will have a strategy regarding the situation with the hotel, where they had a small wetlands, which actually was part of a larger wetland. So that's what we have to do left. And also, there's another situation that he kind of alluded to, which I need to ask him about if that needs fixing. My aim was to get every bit of the wetlands done by the end of April, or if not, the first meeting in May. I don't want to hang over our heads. I do not want to go next year.
No, I want to move it on.
I mean, I'm getting old, let's face it. And it is what it is. And so we have some stuff in the conservation element. I thought that next time, since we will not have a video, we will zero in on those policies. But the first meeting in March, I'm hoping that Laura Lee's video on the wetlands, that the drone with Dylan, that Dylan took that and made a video of the wetlands, swath running north and south, the wetlands that are 5 acres or greater in size, mostly greater. We could look at that little video and discuss part of the conservation element, how we'd like to beef up the language about acquisition.
Mary, if I could just ask, I know you're doing meetings like right up until the dates of these meetings, but if you could send us as much of that stuff as you can in advance to give us a chance to go through it. I mean, I know you want to tell us the story, but it's frustrating to get some of this stuff as we're sitting here and then have to try and work through it. So the more that we could get in advance, that would be very helpful.
Thanks so much for your comment, because I didn't know, how you felt about this, because, you don't want to send some stuff to people that aren't going to read it, And you don't want to say, oh, I got homework. You're not in school. And,
I'm going to read everything you said.
But the thing about it is, now, I got to say on this one, I was working on it, I had actually had to go out and buy some groceries, amazingly, today. But otherwise than that, and my dog, I had to follow up today on quite a bit of this stuff. And so it was not ready. But if I have it ready, now you did get some of this stuff in your agenda packet, but like, for example, the
Yeah, and we did get some of it, but
Let's-
even just like if you could tell us like which item specifically you're planning to address and that kind of thing, that way we can just
right,
dig
that'd
into
be
it a little
nice.
more ourselves.
Because actually, we didn't know till after that meeting what, I brought 3 folders for 3 different policies, and we did not get to anything in one of the folders, which is 1.16.2. So what I know, I'll tell you what, I'll send you what I know, and we'll hope for the best. And when it comes to March, you know, can send you what to look at in the conservation element. The conservation element should go faster because, actually, it's a lot easier to deal with, I've found. You know, because it's in pretty good shape. Thanks for the comment. Will do.
So if I could summarize, March 26th, wetlands and brackish water desalinization.
Okay.
And then April 15th, April 30th, I have empty, but there are still the brownfields discussion that came up at some point in the
Right,
past, the litter discussion that came up as well, and then parts of the natural resources strategies that could still be actionable even without SB 180 now,
Right.
that could be reviewed as well. So I wanted to put those in your mind
Yes.
for topics.
Very good. That sounds good. Anything else that anybody wants to add that they want to discuss in our meeting going forward? Yes?
Like
Member
today,
Debat.
Mr. Johnson was here talking about the ditches and
Yes.
the issues.
Right.
With the rainy season coming, I think it'll be to our advantage to try to figure out where are we? Are we gonna clean the ones underneath 95? You know, where are we? What is DOT doing? FDOT, are they cleaning their portion of it? Not all of it is ours. Where are we?
I'm going to ask Sandra to be here as well at the next meeting, so maybe that could be a time.
That'd be great. That would be great. I got a chance to ask her during the community conference about reclaiming our stormwater and pumping it into the ground, artificial aquifer restoration, and rerouting it as a major plan. And they seem to indicate that that would be more than 20 years off, that they weren't at all, that's not even where they're, I mean, they're so busy trying to fix what's broken today that I don't think they have the wherewithal. And when you think about it, our stormwater evolved. It wasn't designed, it evolved during a period of time when we didn't have stormwater management. So we just had ditches, and we just made the ditches bigger and bigger and bigger as we added more people. We never really thought, is this really where it should go? Is this what we need to do with the water? And unless we, she said to me, unless we, the TEC, make some recommendation in that direction, they're not going to be looking in that direction. So that may be something we want to discuss in the future.
Can I say along that line that at the city council, they, Member Stokel indicated that they wanted an answer towards this in the next 5 years. So
Good.
that's way closer than 20.
Yeah, I would hope so.
The world has changed,
Yeah,
okay, and the river has gone down, and we know partially why. And we still do not know what is the contribution of this city to that river on outfall lines.
Right.
We have no answers. We can only speculate on volume.
Yep.
But we do not have a plan. And we need to have a plan. We need to try to do something with the water that we're putting on the river. We are causing problems. And we can fix that. There's engineering for that.
yeah, there sure is.
So I would like to see that on the agenda
Okay,
and pursue it and work with Public Works and see what they can do and what kind of budget they have and what are their main concerns. So that we get another 500-year rain, at least we would have an idea how to handle it a little better
hopefully it could be managed.
and manageable.
Yeah.
Okay, and so to me, that's a priority because the people are a priority.
So what do you want to call this initiative?
The initiative is just
Redirecting stormwater?
redirecting or looking at the drainage. You can use a lot of words for that.
I'll let Lily figure out what to call
Stormwater
it.
management, how about that?
Stormwater management. That's so generic.
Is that just for like a future date or one of the three
No, this is
upcoming?
going to be one of the three that'll be reoccurring because we think as long as we're continuing to push excess fresh water into the lagoon, we have a problem to solve.
Absolutely.
So redirecting stormwater, litter, brownfields, and the actionable natural resources plan?
Yes.
Well, I thought there was a discussion a long time ago about some of the sewer septic tanks dumping into the river. Is that still a problem, or did that ever get fixed? that they put those septic tanks on the city sewage, or are they still dumping in the river?
I asked about that. The city of Titusville currently does not have a plan in place to get people in the city of Titusville on septic hooked up to sewer. And the problem, I live with it in my neighborhood by Royal Oak because it was built our home was built in 1960. So we've already had to replace our septic tank just a couple of years ago. Had there been a sewer line in the street where all we had to do was hook up, I wouldn't have had to buy a septic tank for $9,000. I would have put a lateral line in for $2,000 and it'd have been done. But because it's not there, I had no option. I had to rebuild it. And now in a few years, I'm going to have to upgrade it again because of state requirements. Again, the city has failed us and not put the line in ahead of time. And I think that's one of the things that the city needs to be doing proactively to dismiss our septic tank problem is going to be to put in sewer lines so that people can hook up. They have the option to hook up. Now, the way I recommended that they do it is that they apply a lien on the property that is benefiting from the sewer line. The lien goes against the property, a 10-year lien. They sell the house, the lien gets paid off. They have 10 years to pay it off, but they're the ones benefiting from it. So that, to me, should mean that the city is not out any cost to have it put in, that the residents that benefit from it earn it, and we move forward. We get the septic tanks erased eventually, but that hasn't happened yet.
I just want to
Yes, ma'am.
comment, I don't know where the city falls or what they're doing, but I know Brevard County has a freeze on permitting for septic at the moment until they can figure this out.
Yeah, but that came with a mileage restriction. If you were by the river or near the river, your permit would not be allowed. But if you were in South Carpenter,
Well, I take
that's over 2 miles or 3 miles.
Our daughter's been looking at property in Mims. Property in Mims is not the riverside.
Side of Mint?
They will not issue a permit.
But are you on the east side
On the
of
west
Mint?
side,
On the west side?
yes.
Okay. I know that the program does have a mileage away from the
From
river.
how far, yeah.
I think it's 3, I want to say 3, but that's a memory thing, so I'm probably wrong.
So we can have a meeting about this?
Well, I have a quick question. So, do we have any data that shows how many residents throughout the city of Titusville are on septic? And two,
Yes.
Sorrel has programs that support
Yes.
a lot of residents who are on septic to how to move away from
And
that.
likewise, they pay more if you're closer to the river than if you're farther from the river.
True.
So, but we're talking about everybody, whether
Yeah.
they're near or far.
And I'm thinking if we're talking about this now, down the road, we maybe develop some kind of, something with our sustainability action plan or some kind of program where we are, as a city, supporting, replacing the septic tanks and hooking into the city sewage if that's possible.
And
Just
also
my
remember,
suggestion.
Whatever gets pumped, it goes to Blue Heron. So you better do something about that plant, because that plant is nearing 25 years. And so it's nearing its capacity, if not it's there. It may be there already. So the population has grown, we need to look at that also. Pumping is the easy part.
Yeah. Yeah. More discussions. Anything else anybody wants to bring up?
So are you, I'm sorry, so that I can prepare the agendas? Are you asking for any of these to be earmarked on future agenda dates or just at some general time? And we'll talk about that at the next meeting.
I think you can put them on the agenda and we can talk about them each for a few minutes at least, so we figure out what we want to do with them.
There could be a lot of information tagged with that item, like just what you're talking about with the septic to sewer. If that were to be an agenda item, to have the full plan that Public Works has presented to council, all the history, like to have a
Yes,
better
That should
discussion.
be after we're done with the wetlands, I think.
Okay, so I'm not going to put any of this on March 26th.
Yeah. I think we need to get rid of the wetland stuff, and I think we need to move that to council so that we can move on with these other issues.
Okay.
First things first. Except that we have to also do the brine water, salt water. Just,
Thank you, Lily, for
Desalinization.
keeping us organized.
yeah. All right. Well, then I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time.